Hey everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to accelerate their business and grow their team. I am here today with Stephen. Stephen, could you introduce yourself?
I'd love to, and it's great to have the opportunity to speak with you, Ben, and your audience. I'm Stephen Jarrett. I've got a career business line of around 18 years, particularly in two fields inside of sales and operations. I did have a nice year and a half in digital marketing, where I helped lead an international team through it would be LATAM, Europe, and then of course the United States. I would not say that's my forte, but I definitely enjoy the process, and it's a practice that I feel flows very well into the go-to-market process, as well as we've seen the advancement in technology, not just to allow people to do more with that, but also then to funnel into your sales process more efficiently with better results. So we can definitely maybe dive into that a little bit too, Ben. But recently, over the last 2.5 years, I've built a thriving executive coaching practice, which has led me to understand that there's some difficulties and struggles in the career services business. Thus led me to design and build out a career services application with a partner of mine, as well as have a deep-rooted passion for helping local marginalized communities. And so inside of the local business in Charlotte, I help team up and work through some local groups and churches, as well as nonprofits that are focused in, again, marginal communities. And I help design and build out business practices, including technology assistance to those groups.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'd love to get to know you. And one of the ways that I like to do that is I love to ask, what was your first job? For me, it was a paper route. How'd you make your first dollar?
So I will also claim paper route was the official from a corporation, but I was on a military base. So I did it on a military base. But the first time I actually was ever paid was when I was 10 and a half. I believe it was 10 and a half. Don't quote me on that. Don't fact check me on that, Ben. But it might have been 11. But it was actually while I was at Andrews Air Force Base, and we shoveled snow. It was the first time there was ever a big snow in that area. And so I believe that was back in 93. But yeah, so that was the first time we actually shoveled out. Gosh, I think it was somewhere in the tune of 50 some odd driveways. And because of that payment, my friends and I pulled our money together and we bought our first PlayStation.
Yeah. I think one of my first purchases, and this will date me, with my paper route money was a NES, a Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah.
Um, so I could play Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. So that'll be some nostalgia for some folks. Um, cool. Well, what toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
That's a wonderful, that's a good question. It's a good one. I would lean it more towards more, it was more in college that helps send me this direction. Cell phones were important for communication, but I felt the speed of communication with AIM was really what has led me to understand how to communicate with individuals much more efficiently and faster. So I would say AIM was the toy that even back into high school, I can think allowed me to communicate more efficiently with friends. And we started planning things much larger. I mean, that was really your first way to be able to communicate quickly through a keyboard. T9 word was never efficient. So that was probably the most that's driven me the most.
Yeah, I have it's my buddy and I, we had a Commodore 64, so we tried to extract some game code, like some board game code from a program, and try to send messages together, but all we could send were like 8 characters. And then a few years later, we saw Prodigy and AIM Messenger and these kinds of instant messaging things, and we were like, "Oh, this is the greatest! It finally exists." It wasn't until years later we realized that we were thinking of that idea before that idea exists, and letting that kind of using that to curse the world. Um, what was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Well, favorite by far would be the and math and science. Definitely that would be my favorite. Um, Probably least, which is something that I love to do now, And it's something that I specifically work very hard to continue to educate myself on. Would be really writing. I would say that was probably my least favorite in high school.
Yeah. Good thing we have some chat GPT to help us out now, right? We can write a lot and quickly.
Well, and then I'll diverge a little bit here and say that it's also a confidence builder. And again, going back to my current career, a lot of times we individuals, and I don't like this term because I feel like it's overused, but you'll have imposter syndrome on a lot of things in your life. And most of the time it's just taking the next small step will help you get through it. And really for me, ChatGPT did help with that a lot, because the first, time I ever really sat and tried to write a blog or something I wanted to share with a client to help them understand a concept or a process, that is a nerve-wracking moment if you have that anxiety. ChatGPT was, when it made its suggestions and its edits, it helped remind me that the original writing, the quality of it was there. It just needed a little brush, right? And that's anything in Europe. So yeah, definitely.
For sure. Yeah, I have some sons in college, and one, of course, when and how to use AI is a big deal there. But he wrote his own paper and then used Claude to revise it, just revision. And that saved a bunch of editing time. The work was original. The revise keyword helped him kind of cinch that.
And something else with that would be data sources and things, and collecting those to ensure that not only the authenticity of the writing is there, but also that you put forth the correct citations and things of that nature. I have a friend who's going through their master's class right now, and they use that quite a bit actually to help with that, which is something that can, you make a small error and you can lose points. So it's an amazing little refinement tool.
Yeah. Well, what quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
Well, actually, it's one that I've often tried to figure out if it is one that is from someone else. I sort of use it for myself now. But because I can't seem to find it, I know I heard it. It must be, maybe it's Mandela effect, but I swear I heard it in a movie once, but as a young kid. So I'll share it with you and maybe your audience can find it. Okay. And if they can, I'd love to hear from them so that I can know what it is perfection is impossible, but the pursuit of perfection is perfect.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Yeah. The only thing I could find is Roger Federer that says in tennis, perfection is impossible. You learn not to dwell on every shot.
Yeah, it very well could be. Sports was a huge part of my life as a child. I ended up actually playing baseball in college, and it could be from that as well. But I really do believe that it was from a movie, and I cannot think of what it was now. But it's somewhere around when I was a preteen to teenager.
Cool. Awesome. Well, what do you think the greatest invention or discovery has been in the past 300 years?
Oh, you could pick a lot. Oh man. But I think you'd have to say the internet, right? Because it continues to drive us today. And without the internet, we couldn't utilize the tools that you and I are using even on this call, right? You and I have our AI recorders on this call. We're obviously going to be able to share this message with to millions, if that's the way the direction it can go, right? So I would have to say that the internet backdrop behind it and all the advancements from that.
Yeah. I would totally agree. Well, so we'll get a little deeper here. What tech trends significantly impacted your industry, and how did your company respond?
So I'll go back and actually show how I think there's been a thread of advancement from that. So I spent the majority of my career with Verizon Wireless. So I spent almost 12 years there. And really from that, and I'm not trying to date myself either here, right? But this, before the purchase of Altel, when we were really living in a space where Palm Trios and Blackberries were in existence, the concept of being able to transfer information and communicate at an efficient rate in a safe manner would be the thread that I would actually progressively move forward in. We've seen this as we've layered in different technologies through wireless communication, or of course, hardline communication through the internet. And what's been the interesting, consistent thread here is the importance of your safety and your security through that method. So I would lean on that as probably the primary direction. And you can see as that has moved, and now that we're in a space where 5G internet is something that's not only normal, but it's pretty consistent in most of the Western world. But then we now also see how just the ability that we have from wired connections and others to transfer swaths of data so quickly and efficiently and securely, even with cybersecurity that has had its moments that are really loud and obnoxious on the news. I do believe that for the mass majority of how we live our lives, we are more secure and safe today, and from a data perspective, than we were in the past. And I would say internet security is the big piece of that.
Yeah, for sure. Even even just watching how third world countries dealt with COVID, they were able to get public service announcemements out through text message really effectively. Like the whole world understood what was going on, or understood the information. So yeah, it's definitely spreading for sure.
Well, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And we can take a different piece there too with the way medical records are. So my wife is she's a nurse practitioner, and in the way that of course, those medical records can be shared, and she's in specialty care, but the fact that they can not only have a meeting and have all of the information provided them from their previous appointments, but then have the ability to have that information, give recommendations, and then go sit with the doctor and come up with a recommendation list as well as then a patient treatment plan. It's an incredible feat that can be done now in seconds, let alone what used to take hours of communication back and forth, or even records being lost in the shuffle and you having to return back to your primary care doctor to get them. Now it's all done before the patient even gets there, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, the good old fax machine. Um,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And then you have to this reliance on physical security then used to be a big deal to secure all those records, the space to store them all, like the physical space.
Yeah.
You're talking about several just your square footage has greatly reduced. You could keep that on a small drive rather than having the file cabinets to store all of that. What are three technology innovations you're betting on to drive your business growth?
Well, I think virtual communication, first of all, as this continues to grow and advance, I think that's a big one. I have clients that are all across the world. I travel, they travel. Even last week while I was in Miami meeting at a conference, it was nice that I could still have connections and visually connect with my clients as they're going through some planning and things for 2025. So that's a big one. AI technology, obviously, we've already touched on that slightly, but the fact that I can now run my business and have the ability to have an advisor with me at all times. I can have someone I can actually coach myself through the technology, right? To ensure that I'm not just growing as a communicator and as someone who's there to be a thinking partner, but also ensure that I'm listening properly to my clients and extract the proper information to help them advance with whatever situation they might be dealing with. And then I would say the third one would be our ability to be able to store the data, like we've already kind of discussed. And this kind of streams back into the other two, with the fact that I can now have a clean, safe place to keep all of the information that we gather together with an interpersonal client. I can then, of course, give them information and give them access back to that data so they can see their own growth, whether that's inside their corporation and see how the company has grown, whether it's personally, how they've grown, or in the other two businesses that I have now, where you have some more secure information that needs to be kept. And it needs to be in a secure location without the possibility of their information being shared. Having that comfort and security to be able to have that is important. So those three things all together.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. For your coaching practice, do you kind of package anything, or are you mainly focused on one-on-one?
So I'm in the process right now because of my other two businesses. It's quite apparent to me that there's opportunities for packages as I've met with some of my clients. What I've done is I shift that away from, say, a one-on-one. I consider all of my executive clients, that's a relationship. It takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of time to build that trust, right? And so that will always stay as a one-on-one. That is something that I provide that, and I believe that is not just essential, but it's the right way to do that. Now, downstream coaching that comes after that, whether that's team related and adjustments, that can filter into, say, my advising business. That can work on that front, even though predominantly that is nonprofit. There have been occasions where that is filled in. I also have built great partnerships with different organizations that have AI coaching tools that can go downstream into those corporations as well, as they start to decide on KPIs they want to reach out to. Maybe they want to advance a coaching plan. Maybe there's new programs being built out or new technology tech stacks that are being introduced. Those AI coaching tools that are out there and they continue to get better can really help maintain that development, whether that's a sales team, an operations team, even inside of an HR hiring team. Some interesting things are being done on that front. But it also then gives an opportunity in each of those tools to make sure that the personal development of those employees, thus uplifting the happiness. So that I would say that is the main area that is not just exciting right now, Ben, but so much more will end up coming out in the very near future. It's amazing at the rate of speed that that's advancing right now.
Yeah, totally. No, that's really cool. We have a set of playbooks on the technology side. Software development kind of gives us this means of operation, these agile processes. We get a lot from industry best practices. But what I'm finding is that CEOs really need CEOs and like the senior team really need like their own operating system or their own operating model. So we've kind of packaged up some things to help with that. If that's, if that's light or weak, kind of inspired by 12-week year and the one thing where, getting the executive team to really come together and decide what is the one thing, what is the highest priority, because that benefits technology so much to know like, okay, well, what's one problem we can focus on solving? I feel like there's this currency in tech, which is focus and prioritization is like really a currency for us. If we can narrow focus on one particular outcome, then your tech guys can really crush that. But if you're kind of all over the place, that becomes difficult. So we have we've been really playing with different ways of packaging that, and even some prompt engineering around some of those coaching aspects that you've talked about.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I think part of that goes into sitting with whether it's the CEO or the entire C-suite in general and fully understanding not just what they're trying to gain out of the mission vision of the company, which helps then you can build the goals downstream. But I think there's also that fine line of understanding then what are they trying to get out of it personally, and allowing the vehicle, if you will, to be the corporation to help fuel that personal ambition, because that we've all dealt with burnout at some point. And if you haven't dealt with burnout, then, bless you for that. But if anyone who ever has, you understand that most of the time that doesn't come from a lack of attempt of balancing and stability, right? That becomes from a lack of understanding how to stay balanced between your personal life and your work life. I call it surviving and thriving. And that's really the whole hopes and dreams that any C-suite can figure out for themselves. That allows that to flow downstream and creates a better culture, right? So I think what you're talking about is more on the creating the right mechanisms inside of the survival department of what everyone's job is and how they should do it. I think that's absolutely fabulous. And I'll pick your brain more about that, obviously, maybe another time.
Cool. Well, what are some of the most significant gaps between your ambitions and realities of today?
I'm a coach from dreaming, so I've got some pretty big dreams, Ben.
That's good.
Yeah. So there's really two ways. I'll say two. There's two big ambitions that I have. But I'll also then throw in a caveat of how you can live them. So one of my biggest ambitions when I made the decision and the choice that my coaching practice was going to be something that I was going to truly build and allow it to fuel other ambitions that I had, it really came from a fact that I wanted to be able to achieve more in life than what I felt like I was doing. It was great that I was assisting within C-suite. It was great that I was having opportunities to build corporations and grow teams and allow individuals to live a life that maybe they didn't think that they could live, whether that was monetarily or maybe that was professionally and achieving things that they didn't think. That was all wonderful in that side of my life. But there was a piece of that missing for myself. And the biggest piece of that was I didn't feel like I was creating enough value and impact. So one of my largest ambitions that I have for myself is that as I grow, not just the coaching practice, but as I grow these other businesses, that impact that I can have and that value creation that I can have will have much deeper roots than what I was doing when I was initially just working inside of one organization and just one clientele set or one set of business operational functions. And so I'll say that's the ambition versus say what the reality is at this point. Obviously, I'm living some of that, but I don't think I'll have that until I'm actually, reaching some numbers, not only a number of individuals that I can influence, right, but a number of, and I won't share the true number because that's private, but there is a number that I have been, the amount of people that I would like to say that I've transformed their life, and that number grows. And so that's a big one. That's the reality I'm looking for. I don't have that number quite yet. So
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I know a couple of organizations that manage their vision in that way. I spent some time with the guys at Custom Ink, and they had a goal to create a t-shirt for every person in America. So the population of America was their kind of goal number that they were working to. And that was their 5 to 10 year vision, like having that maximum number of people that you want to like really influence or impact with your product or service. That's a great way to drive that 5 to 10 year outcome.
Yeah, I would agree.
What's the biggest challenge to maintaining a competitive edge in your industry?
I think it's desire to help others is the primary. I think that I've been blessed to be surrounded by really great mentors and educators, and regardless of whether it would be my coaching business, maybe it's the the career services business. If you have the right priorities and the right understanding of what drives you, your why, if you will, then I think that's what will separate you. And for me, whether it was when I was competing in sports, I've always had a desire to be able to help the team win, and through that team win, understanding the selfishness in that, right? It's the concept of when you're on an airplane, you have to put your mask on first before you can help everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so that constant desire to want to help others pushes me to help myself. And so I have to be the best version of myself. I have a goal of, and I like to say consuming, not just reading, but consuming 25 books every single year, right? And I've got a long way to go. I'm sitting right now at 17, so it's getting this year. So I have to prioritize myself for that, right? But it's been interesting as I've read through a lot of these books, I'm now finding I'm reading the books that my clients are reading, right? Instead of just my own journey on where I believe that I needed to go. And that has been an interesting moment to realize that I can create impact just by walking through a path with someone else, right? So that's what drives me, is to help others. And ultimately, I feel like if you wake up every single day with a burning desire to make yourself the best version of yourself so that you can help everyone else around you properly, I think you'll find success.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, so let's take a little segue for that. What's some of the best books that you've read?
So one of them right now that I keep coming back to because of the career services business, and it's an oldie actually. I actually have it right here. So the first 90 days is a great one, right? And it just again gives a leader an opportunity. It's more junior, but I absolutely love it. The Servant is another great one. A Book of Beautiful Questions is one that I've actually read twice this year.
Going back to that one, the first 90 days, what's the synopsis of that again?
So the idea and the premise is every leader, when you get introduced, whether it's internally inside of your own organization or into, of course, a whole new world that you're coming into, it's how do you set up your 30, 60, and your 90 days to make you into an impact player as well as basically a servant of your team. And and so that is the breakdown of what it is. And it goes into some different areas that I think somewhat can be advanced based on my copy. Maybe there's a revised copy, but it definitely could use a little bit more of a technology push in it if you want me to be a critical, maybe a critical eye on it. But truly, it gives the foundational principles of what we all should do about looking at the team and getting to know the principles of the team and the individuals as people, and then grow that through, then understanding in that first 30 days of the team and the people into then the technical aspect of whatever that might be, depending on your level, right, of where you're entering that organization as a leader or an individual contributor. And then, of course, the final 90 is putting it all together and really making your imprint, your thumbprint, if you will, on the organization as quickly as you possibly can.
That's really cool. And yeah, that's really awesome. I'm going to check that out. We're looking at our customer experience, especially on those first 30, 60, 90 days. So it'd be cool to read that with this angle of like, okay, we're engaging with the customer for the first time. What are the things that we need to do to establish the highest level of impact? So that's really, really cool. Super cool. What are some of the others that have made a biggest impact on your life?
Other books? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I think basic early stage of my leadership career, and I believe everyone needs to build a foundation, right? And then you need something to run back to when things get hard. So I would say most writings from Maxwell, John Maxwell, very helpful for an early introduction of a leader, right? But even beyond that, there's a daily reader right now, and it sits on I've got this little nook in my master, and it sits there with me because I believe in this concept of reflection, discovery, and execution. And that daily reader is interesting because it gives quick little quips about basic concepts of what it's like to recognize your team, yourself, development, things of that nature. But when you're reflecting on your day, I feel like that book allows you to be able to really dissect that and not look for the things you needed to necessarily always improve, but helps you reflect back on the things that went well. And that's your blueprint of your success. And if you can take that blueprint and then apply that to the areas in what I call the discovery section of that moment for yourself, it's easier to put the positive things on top of the negatives and correct them, then moving to execution and then scheduling for yourself to make you productive the next day. That is the best way to do that. And that book reminds me of a lot of different ways to do that, as well as brings me back to moments to think about the day differently. And a lot of my clients like the quick little snippet pictures. I send them of those. Mostly that's in the morning though. And Apple's good now because they don't have to get that text message at 5:45 in the morning when I used to.
And I'm trying to make sure I don't say this in a value signaling way. I get the similar response in like a daily Bible plan,
Yeah.
where I can like grab a little faith-based meditation. That's the pretty consistent part of my routine. But I've also gotten a lot of benefits out of the 12-week year, which is like time compression. General, like I think it's that some EOS guys EOS has been really good at like quarterly planning rather than the annual planning that seems pretty broken in most organizations. And then, but one that you may not have heard of because it's a little aged, but it's just really been transformative for me. It's called Loving What Is, by this lady, Byron Katie. And it's all about reframing, because we tell ourselves stories about what we experience. We add a lot of things to reality, as we interpret it. We really give our problems their own drama. And so she's got a 4-question process on how to work through beliefs. And so, just as you go through life, you may have some underlying beliefs, and her process that she calls the work is how you work through those kind of false beliefs or false things. It's been amazing. And then I've even gotten my wife turned on to that. And she's uncovered some things just about some deeper beliefs around socializing. Like, do people really like me? Do people not really like me? Um, and when you talk about that imposter syndrome, as I interview, especially startup CEOs or first time entrepreneurs, they really feel like, well, I have to have everything figured out. Okay, well, is that really true? Like, do you need to have everything figured out, or do you just need to know the next most important thing? And so it's interesting to see, like, using that process, see them kind of overcome some of the imposter syndrome feelings around being a first time entrepreneur.
I'll give you one more that might be interesting, and we can take this deeper as well. But an area that really helped me, and whether you're a religious individual or just an individual who believes in the universe, there's different words you can call this. You can call it your essence, you could call this your unique abilities, or you could call this your calling, right? And each of us have something that fits into that piece. And so I love to walk my clients through, typically after we go through, say, a dreaming session and really understand their why. This is the next logical next step that we would go through. And what this does is even from a small child, you have a thing about you that has made you special. And this is proven through science, right? Inside of us, right? No other strand of DNA is ever going to match in the past, the current, or the future, right? So you are truly unique and something special. And if you have that understanding and you can have that piece, then there is a piece that if you pull like a thread, it would unlock and hit along every time you were truly acting at your best self, right? When you were truly, and it's always a good thing. It's always a positive thing. It's this piece that makes you you is the fun journey. And there's some homework and things that go on it to reach out to family members, but it helps with that right there, because it starts for you to understand a little bit more of not the forms that the world places upon you or beliefs. I like that term as well. That kind of stick to us as we grow up, right? These stereotypical things, society places these things on you. And it starts to allow you to peel back some of those and get to know really more who your authentic self is and who you are as a leader. And I've had some pretty good success with seeing some folks really unlock that imposter syndrome and build momentum off of that.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Well, how do you build a culture, or what are some tips that you might give around building a culture and digital fluency within an organization?
I think you always hear the stereotypical starts at the top, right? So it's not just what you say, but what you do as a leader and truly represent that. We've all seen the kind of the pullback into offices from remote work, right? We've seen that, and there's pluses and negatives to that. We've seen the concept of half day Fridays or off day work from home Fridays, right? And what that can look like, right? And it really doesn't matter your opinion and my choice. Whatever you choose as a leader, as long as you lean into that and you really embody that and you live it as well as you preach it, then I think that will come through. Now, from a digital perspective, I think you have to display it in that way to make it comfortable for it to be seen. We've talked a lot about how digital is moving the world and changing the world. And there's a lot of, I'll even say, fear out there that AI can eliminate jobs. And much as the internet was supposedly going to eliminate jobs, and I'm not going to be the one to profess that I have an opinion one way or the other. There are much smarter, much more intellectual people than me that can have that debate. But what I can say is, from the individual people that I've worked with, whether you're the CEO of a corporation making very large decision since you talked about annual operating plan for next year, or you're an individual trying to make a decision coming out of college about what you want to do with your life, the tools that are out there can be very helpful, but the foundation of the leaders that have come before you, that have imprinted on you, will help you make that choice more efficiently for the data that you have for yourself in that moment. So provide the answer.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah. And I also think, as part of that is the community, or the getting people together. We implemented something called squads, which is really outside of the client initiative that we're working on. We implemented a small group strategy. And the small group is really like it's kind of like a mastermind forum or within your practice area, so within your discipline of expertise. Um, you get together with other people who do a similar thing as you, and for 90 minutes a month, we have specially designed a little workshop for them. And so I design this workshop every month, and so one might be, hey, go and ask around, like have everybody go around and say, hey, what do our core values mean to you? How do you think somebody actions these core values? What is something that you might do at another company, but you wouldn't do here because of these core values? Like, how do these impact us? And then we may also talk about some hard skill technical things, but for the most part, it's soft skills, communication, and getting people to open up to one another. And I particularly think, especially in STEM, introversion becomes a mask, right? To be introverted is just like, okay, well, I'm just comfortable like not saying anything. But when you serve clients, when you're in services industry and your service is expertise, that becomes an anti-pattern. So a lot of why we do this is to get people used to communicating and opening up and break through some of that in a safe space. Because certainly if the client asks, hey, what do you think? You want to be prepared to have an opinion. In fact, we say like the only thing that's not an option is not having an opinion. You have to have an opinion. So yeah, cool. Well, is there any experience that you have either learned from failure or that any advice you would give on somebody just starting? So like what's a hard lesson you learned, and then what would you pass on to somebody who's starting their career or starting their work in digital transformation?
So I actually I'll go to my time at Verizon, because we dealt with a lot of change throughout that corporation, right? Whether that was that the purchase of Alto, like I mentioned, whether that was the transition from the world of introducing, say, the iPhone and embracing that world into us. That was a big deal. And also, I would say then realizing that we had to mold and change as an industry to be able to adjust to a new world where the devices had much higher value, right? So the trade-in program that everyone utilizes today, that didn't exist, right? That was a creation. And so I got to be a part of that team that helped build that throughout the local stores. And there was a lot of adjustment that had to be made in each one of these moments, right? And so I would say having an open mind, not just to what's going well today, but truly always looking and having a hunger and a curiosity of what can make it better tomorrow. And if you do that with an eye on not just how that affects the corporation that you're at, but also how that would affect your own personal journey, and understand that those do not have to be separate from each other. And then also being able to layer in how either one of those two advancements, if you can move the company as well as yourself, how that can affect everyone else around you. So whether you're an individual contributor and what you're doing to make yourself better, to make the team better, to help make the company better, to help your leader better, or you're the CEO needing to keep your the finger on the pulse of change of not just the industry that you're in, but then obviously the blending and the blurring of the lines of our industries anymore, right? With technology and how it's emerging and pushing industries that maybe were very separate in the past into having to embrace this world that we see. I think that is just as important as a CEO to understand how that helps you personally, as well as how that moves your corporation and then the people forward. It would be my best recommendation.
Really good. Awesome. Well, if people like what you've had to share today, how should they connect with you?
So I think you can always link with me on LinkedIn. That's one of the ways you can see some different postings and things of that nature. If you would like to go check out the website, I have a website that's Jarrett, JARRETT -solutions LLC.com. I'll also ask you, of course, to place that in your notes for them. So if they'd like to do that. And then reach out to me through a direct message, or of course you can utilize my calendar links that I can share with you if you'd like to do a catch up. I would love to sit and learn about anything about you, including where your dreams and your aspirations are wanting to take you. And the fun part about what I get to do is whether or not you are a CEO that is starting off as a founder, or someone who's looking to make a pivot and a change for your team. I've had experiences and been blessed to work with both. And I would love to be able to have the opportunity to learn more about what you're looking to do with your career.
Awesome. We'll definitely have that in the show notes. And Stephen, I just really appreciate you meeting with us today.
It was a pleasure, Ben, and I look forward to seeing you again.